Thank you for tuning in to the Practical Preservation Podcast. Please take a moment to visit our website, practicalpreservationservices.com, for additional information and tips to help you restore your historical home. If you've not done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, and also like us on Facebook. Welcome to the Practical Preservation Podcast, hosted by Danielle and Jonathan Kepperling. Kepperling Preservation Services is a family-owned business based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, dedicated to the preservation of our built architectural history for today's use as well as future generations. Our weekly podcast provides you with expert advice specific to the unique needs of renovating a historic home, educating by sharing our From the Trenches preservation knowledge and our guests' expertise, balancing modern needs while maintaining the historical significance, character, and beauty of your period home.
Today on the Practical Preservation Podcast, I have with us Christopher Vera, the director of the Columbia Historic Preservation Society. Thanks for joining me today, Chris.
Nice to be with you.
So tell me about your background.
Oh, well, my background is growing up in Columbia. We had 7 kids in my family. My father was a dedicated dairy manager for a pantry pride back in the day in Columbia. And, how I got to be so passionate about what I do is I would start working for elderly people down the street from me about 8 years old. And I just went through loving what I did for them. And they would tell me stories about the town, things like that. And even up into my teenage years, up to I was 16, I worked for Mary Schumann, who had a little restaurant on Locust Street here in Columbia. And she would sit there with her Pall Mall non-filter cigarettes at 89 years old and just keep on plowing down, telling me stories about the history of Columbia. And it just took,
Right.
and then my passion for Columbia history was just taken off. Because even though the schools really never taught it, I did have one class that I aced over 100% for the market period because it was Columbia history. But I don't know, it's just a passion of what it was, what it could be in the future, and digging up old history that nobody knows about.
Right, or that people forgot.
They
Somebody
forgot.
knew, but
Right,
everybody that
right.
knew isn't here anymore. So
Right,
now,
exactly.
yeah.
All the generals that we had in this town. I mean, Columbia had 10 generals. That's the most per capita in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's including the Navy with corporals and things
Right.
like that. But yeah, I mean, that's amazing.
That is,
for a
yeah.
small town.
Well, and this was really in the early 1700s. It was the Western frontier.
This is the gateway to the West. They
Yeah.
take the ferry, you have to take the wheels off the wagon, take them across. Then you could bring the animals over, take them across. Then you take the goods over. Then you take the. So it was a long trip just to get across because it's a mile wide at that time, and very, very non-navigable. What we see today is not what the river looks like back then. I mean,
I knew they had locks and
a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. Okay. So that's kind of your why you chose
Why I
history.
chose history.
Yeah. So tell me about your work at the Columbia Historic Preservation Society.
Well, I came here in 2009 when the elderly people who were running it just couldn't do it anymore. It was Bob, but Florence Miller passed away. She was the past president. And then we took it over. It was a new group. But when I started doing my walk around, I volunteered here before, but she was real close to this place and really wouldn't let me do a lot. So basically I just bailed out again because it was sort of like a lockdown type of museum, open like 3 hours per week. It was just not doing anything. And I started doing a walk around, and then I started knowing that there was mold in like the main hall. It just didn't smell right. Let's put it that way.
Right.
So I started doing a walk around and went to the back basement. They actually drywalled, you being in restoration, they actually drywalled a stone basement.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, that's what you'd say, with water pouring down from rains over the years.
Yeah.
So we had a major mold problem, especially with all the archives. The white display cases that lined the main hall were all brown from the mold spores. So I had a major mold problem.
Yeah.
And we had $50,000 in the bank. So as new directors, all brand new directors, we had to make some really, really drastic decisions. One of my directors at that time wanted to tear both buildings down, throw everything out, and start new. to me, she wasn't from Columbia. And I said, that will never happen. Not one photo will leave this building.
Yeah.
Even with a woman with a child in her arms, will never leave this building. We will rebuild this. We will save everything because it was saved before.
Right.
So I brought in one of the best mold specialists in the United States, because being a museum, you want to bring in the best.
Yeah.
He went down into the back basement, and when I heard, "Oh, my mother, Lord," he came up. He did Katrina. He did everything.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was in all these big. He said that had to be one of the most worst mold areas he's ever seen.
Right.
So we had to get another mold remediation team in here. We had to temperature control everything in the building. I had to bring air conditioning in. So I told my directors, I said, let's spend $40,000 out of that $50,000. Keep $10,000 for our bills, or some fundraising, and get this cleaned up. So we brought Zach Sarovic from Indoor Solutions in, and he's actually the gentleman who saved the 9/11 flag up in New York.
Okay.
So he knew what he was doing. For some reason, all the motor remediation guys are Russian. I don't know why. Yeah, he came in and became a really good friend of mine, and they went through this whole building, cleaned everything, gave us a new fresh start. And but that one woman who wanted to tear everything down, throw everything out, she became the terror. She sued me and everything.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
so it was really hard. I'm helping my mother at the Columbia Market House for 20 hours a week. I'm working 70 hours as the manager up in Harrisburg, and then putting 40 hours in this place.
Oh my goodness.
And I didn't need people to, so I'm strong-willed. I'm an Italian from Columbia. I wasn't going to take any of her crap.
Right.
And I basically turned the pages on her, and she's no longer in the state of Pennsylvania. Being a good U.S. attorney helped me out, and we got her out of the state before she caused any more harm to this town, because she started doing, going after everybody in this town.
Oh,
We didn't do that.
crazy.
She makes her presence once in a great while to me, but I just the love she shows towards me.
It
So,
shows
but
you
but
that
you know what?
she's still thinking about
Yes,
you.
yes. But it gave us a new start and new things to look, and the passion was even more, I think, to myself now.
More of a
Yeah.
Well, and this is a beautiful building.
It is 1850 Evangelical Lutheran Church. So, but yeah, we still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
It's been 10 years, but I feel confident we'll get there.
But yeah, the water, we always talk about water being the biggest problem in an older, well, in any building, but definitely in an older building, when you trap it like that. I mean, if even if the water was sitting in the basement, if it hadn't been trapped behind the drywall, you wouldn't have had all those problems.
Exactly.
I mean, not that water standing in your basement's ideal, but at least it wouldn't be causing mold.
Exactly. And and then I was big on temperature control. We're learning all about temperature control in buildings.
Right.
Actually, we have other museums that bring things here because they know I'm so basically anal on temperature control.
Right.
I keep the humidity down on both buildings to a level that I know it won't. But the people who ran it before me for 15, 20 years would turn the heat off in the wintertime. And it'll be cold in here. Well, when you bring it back up the temperature up in springtime, that's mold spore season.
Oh yeah.
So then you're going to get so every article in these two buildings were just covered with mold. So it was a disaster. But we cleaned it up. We had a new start, and that was the biggest thing.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually do know that it needs to be like 60, 70 degrees.
60% is my, if something ain't 60%, I'm really like, but like I said, we may not have the prettiest thing, but we sealed the windows. We did things that we needed to do to secure people that Columbia's future.
And you preserve the building
and the contents. Right, exactly.
Yes. So, well, I think you did it. I think you did a good job, and sometimes those decisions aren't easy to make, but they're the right thing to do, and then you just have to kind of figure out how to see it through.
Exactly.
So, tell me about the legend of, is it Albawitch?
Albatwitch.
Albawitch.
We've heard that.
Okay.
Yeah, we hear everything. Albatwitch. We hear everything. It's one of those names. But Albatwitch, actually, we knew the legend was around. It was a friend of mine, Rick Fisher, and I, 7 years ago, decided to say, hey, let's start a festival in town here, the Albatwitch Festival. And we were like, what's an Albatwitch? First of all, Well, in Pennsylvania Dutch means apple witch.
Okay.
It starts. We hear stories of the Susquehannock Indians actually seeing this creature. It's a 4 to 5 foot creature
Okay.
that's very nimble. Knows how to climb trees. We always hear stories about the large yellow glowing eyes. My brother actually, in teenage years, I remember him coming home very terrified. He was at the Prospect 1-lane tunnel. That's when there was really no homes out there,
Yeah.
and he goes through it with his friend, and they see this thing jump down chasing a rabbit right in front of their headlights, and he would say it was like so super fast,
Oh, yeah.
and it was running after this rabbit, and they called it the devil baby, of course,
Right.
and of course everybody says, "What are you smoking that night?" Of course, it's always that answer, But so we decided let's start this thing because we know it was around, so we dug up so much history about
Well,
this
I was
creature.
gonna say that you have on your website
Yes. A lot of the articles.
the articles from 100 years ago.
100 years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
I mean, when the Cub Scout and the Boy Scouts would go out camping outside Columbia, the Boy Scout leader would say, "Okay, boys, let's go out looking for an albatwitch," So it was sort of like a thing we did. Apple snitching, when you hold a bag down and you chase the little critters into your bag and you scare your friend who's never done it before. Yeah, it was a big folklore thing, but but we've gathered up sightings right up until 2012 of this creature. I actually did a lecture on the albatwitch for Shanks Mare Kayaking Company over in Wrightsville, and nobody raised their hands when I asked them, "Did anybody ever see a strange creature?" And until the next day, a gentleman emailed me about a creature over in Windsor. Him and his father-in-law came. They heard the noise outside in a tree. They went out with flashlights and shined it up, and they saw this big, large creature, like hanging on the branches and climbing, and just took off. So, and then Rick Fisher actually saw one in 2003. He writes about it in his book that he trailed out of Marietta Pike. So we do have a lot of sightings of it. It's nocturnal. But we thought, we got different like Bigfoot conventions and all this other stuff going on. Let's start an albatwitch festival. So it's our 7th year. So we decided to take it upon ourselves. Our first year we had like 2,000 people show up, and but it's bringing some great speakers in. We got some great speakers coming in this year, even though with COVID and everything.
Right.
But the albatwitch is something that we can grow. And the whole town should cherish this creature.
Right.
You got great history already.
And
Let's
then
just add to it.
Right.
I mean, I had a documentary company from the UK, a pretty big documentary company, Dream Vision, called me up and said, "Hey, we want to do a documentary on the albatwitch." So that's what we want to hear.
Right. Well, and it'll bring different tourists.
Different tourists. Oh, trust me, I've seen the creatures come out the last 7 years or 6 years. I've seen some creatures come out. Some scary ones. I always tell my volunteers, keep an eye on that one. So yeah.
Jonathan and I several years ago went to the ghost dinner at the Accomack Inn.
Okay.
And we were sitting there, and we were at a table with people we didn't know because they just sat everybody together.
Right.
And the guy was talking about how much his ghost hunting equipment was, and I was being funny because I think I'm pretty funny. Right. And I said to Jonathan, I said, "Can you imagine going to the bank and asking for a loan for ghost hunting equipment?" And the lady beside me got really offended and said that she thought a bank would give you money for that. Wow. And she was very upset with me that I was not a true believer.
Wow, yikes.
I'm like,
I never spent that much money on my ghost hunting equipment because I don't feel like that's necessary, but they'll come out when they want to come out. Remember, they're watching you before you see them, just like an albatwitch,
Well, I think that's, and that reminds me too, I know Landis Valley does their, I can't think of what
it's like a Heritage Day.
Well, they do a beastnickel, or I don't know.
Okay.
It's the Santa Claus that comes to punish bad children.
Oh,
it's a Pennsylvania Dutch thing.
Yeah, that's
beastnickel, something like that.
Belschnickel, yes.
Yeah. So I'm thinking though it's similar.
My mother, when she ran the Columbia Market House, had a guy come in. He was dressed as Belschnickel. She thought he was a vagrant.
Oh,
so she called the police on him and got him kicked out of the market house. And she wouldn't let him convince I'm just Belschnickel,
That's really funny. Oh, so tell me about some, because with the festival, then you also do Columbia Ghost Stories also?
Yeah, I do ghost tours.
Yeah.
We're having actually a Fright Night at the museum on
Okay.
Saturday, October 31st, where Rick Fisher will show slides on his new book, and then we'll do out on tour on the streets, and we do factual tours. I mean,
Okay.
I've been to Gettysburg. We do have Mark Nesbitt coming for Albatwitch this year. He was the owner of Gettysburg Ghost Tours.
Okay.
So he's a big follower.
Yes.
I believe his stories. He does true stories. But a lot of your ghost tours are somewhat false. You know, they don't gather up the true history of it. Rick and I, when I'm done with the history, that he goes in with the ghost tours, or we'll do both together. And we've actually had a lot of different ghosts actually, like in the museum here. They'll pop up once in a great while. The Market House, little Katie Durborough, which I have a picture of her, which I'll show on my tour. She actually, when I go in and say, "Is Katie, are you here?" and you hear this little like that, and she'll let you know that she's there. Of course, everybody's whipping out their cameras up, trying to catch Katie. Katie's not just giving herself up. Katie doesn't do photo ops, you know. But the dungeons in the Market House is, which hopefully when they're done renovating from the Market House, we'll get it, because they're from 1834.
Okay.
And they are like
is the so the foundation's older than the
just the front part. There's 6 cells downstairs, but they're just there's a solitary confinement cell that's just absolutely vintage. I had a retired state police corporal come to me. He says, if we had jails like that, we wouldn't have prisoners.
I've been down to Eastern State Penitentiary. And that the be in solitary confinement all that time would be I think that would be really hard.
So I used to run a theme park down there for my mother to raise money, and I did that for 4 years. Nightmares of the Dungeons. And my brother actually used to have to walk me down. That's how terrified I was.
Oh, did he?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I did recordings down there, and it came out not good. Women screaming, things like that. It was bad. It was bad. So I'm terrified of ghosts. So just let you know.
And you're here. You are doing all these tours.
I know, isn't that crazy? Don't worry, I'll be the first to run, people. So I always tell them, if you see me running, run. You know, I'm not going to chase after them. That's for sure. You know, but Albatwitch is it's growing. It's getting bigger. You know, it's getting really a lot of media attention. That's what we really want, because we believe it's just not humans walking around in Columbia in history. It's this creature was actually seen first in the United States right here in Columbia, which I think is really cool. So it's history. It's part of history. We got to cherish it. Some people may not like it because it's a creepy creature or a myth. But we have to take hold of it, because it's like people in West Virginia with Mothman.
Mothman. It's part of the history. It's part of the history of the area.
Sure.
I agree. Sure. So are there like some? I know you talked about the dungeons a little bit at the Columbia Market. Are there some like well-known Columbia ghost stories, or do you?
Well, you're sitting in it right now, the museum.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we have like 5 that roam around in here. Okay. We brought people from New York to come down. My friend Rick, he brought them down. They didn't know nothing about this building. They didn't even know who I was.
Right.
And he sits them down. He gave them 15 minutes to walk around, and they sat down. And he asked them, "What do you feel?" I introduced myself. I said, "What do you feel?" They were pinpointing almost everything that we see and hear.
Oh, really?
It was amazing. It was like, wow, you see the person pacing on the back steps. You hear the babies crying where they had the baptisms upstairs, or the African American woman in the kitchen. We actually had a visitor last year come up to our front desk and say, "Who's the African American woman in the kitchen?" We're like, my volunteer, like, there's nobody back there, but they seen her. You know, so she don't like anybody in the kitchen.
Well,
she's laughed at me, whistled at me, not the good whistle either. But she does things to me sometimes. But she don't like people in the kitchen. So, but there's other ghost stories, that we do in town that are factual. That like the Raceberry Mansion, things like that.
Oh yeah.
That they don't like to talk about, but it happens, but we gathered up some great stories.
Oh, that's great. And that tour, that's the Fright Night at the museum.
Fright Night at the museum, and then we're doing the haunted trolley tours out of Twitch night. 7 and 9 p.m. tour. So we're going to be taking the trolley for the first time, and during Albatwitch, I like to take the trolley up into Chickies. I tell stories about this during the day so kids can take the ride, and then we'll go up the old Kleinsville Road up into the backside of Chickies, the dark area, And we'll actually line up. It's tradition now. Been doing it for 5 years. We all throw apples into the woods to commemorate the creature, right? And it's huge. People love doing it. It's
Yeah.
5 hours per person. That's basically the only thing you got paid for besides food. And they all throw it. So at nighttime during the tour, we're going to go up into the feeding grounds in the dark.
Okay.
So if you're afraid of the dark and don't know what's in the dark woods, it should be thrilling because I don't know how I'm going to take it. So because I always tell the kids to keep their hands in the windows because you never know when they're going to jump on top of the roof of the
Yeah.
trolley. And plus that same road, there was back in 1896, there was a bad trolley accident on a Sunday afternoon that killed 6 people and it hurt a lot of people. So we're told there's people who roam that land.
Okay.
So we never know where we're going to see up a Clinesville Road in the dark.
Yeah.
So it should be exciting. But we know there's a woman in a dress that walks the road. And plus, we're going to stop near the Mount Zion AME Cemetery, which is one of the oldest African American cemeteries in our county. So which has Civil War soldiers, abolitionists, and things like that. So, yep.
Okay, well, very good. Well, what trends or challenges do you see in preservation? Or just from
Preservation,
your,
yeah,
in
I
general,
mean,
like what from your
yeah,
little vantage point?
I mean, funding. I mean, funding
Yeah.
is the number one thing. I mean,
Right.
being a nonprofit is, when back during the recession when they took all that funding away
Oh,
from
yeah.
us, where do we go? I mean, you know, you can only not put somebody, but you want each town to have history.
Right.
You don't want one big building in the center of the county to have that history. You
Right.
want these towns to gather and rally around to have the preservation of their articles
Right.
of history, and that's the sort of the route a lot of people are going to shutting down museums. Of what's going to happen after COVID?
Right.
Are they going to be able to survive? And all the articles get auctioned off, or they get put into a bigger museum somewhere else?
Right.
And that's the sad thing because we shouldn't have to go through that because volunteers are very hard to find.
Right.
I only actually have one volunteer who lives in Columbia, and all my other directors and everything
Really?
live outside of town because they feel I don't live in Columbia. I haven't lived here in over 25
Right.
years, but I come back here because I know there's people want to hear about our history. I do lectures, I do classes at Penn State of York. I have 8 booked for hopefully this late fall and early spring. Is teaching people. I love talking about Columbia history.
Right.
I always remember one lecture 3 years ago at Brethren Village up in Linnets. Of course it was, and everybody looking at me, oh my God, he's from Columbia, because Columbia had that bad rap of
Yeah.
prostitution and things like that
Right.
back in the day. So I had to break it down for him. I said, look, how many of your parents told you to drive around Columbia, not through Columbia? And half of them raised their hand. I said, well, you know what? Columbia is a great town.
Right.
You got to
Well, and
look
I
past that.
I was never aware of all of the history
Oh, yeah.
here until maybe 10 years ago.
Right.
Of like when I started talking about to Randy Harris about the Underground Railroad and learning about all the industry that was here and it was a huge booming town.
Huge. Very
Yeah.
self-sufficient.
Yeah.
But you're talking about almost the capital of the United States, almost the capital of Pennsylvania,
Right.
the home of the Underground Railroad, which is proven now that we are the stopping the Confederacy across the river. These are monumental moments, and and now I'm working on the one of the most famous cookie guys that started his business up here, Godfrey Keebler Cookies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He started down on Front Street.
Oh,
His
really?
original ad in 1846. So these are the type of people, this is how we grow our history.
Right.
If you
Yeah.
don't do the research, before I got here, it was sort of stagnant.
Right.
We didn't have much going on. It was, and now people are starting to see the light that, hey, Columbia is not a bad town after all, with all the history we have sitting right here.
Right.
But we have to work together to make it that way.
Yeah.
I mean,
And there are some beautiful buildings. in
oh,
Columbia,
the
too.
architecture is
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Urban, all those guys,
Yeah.
too bad the Reading train station, Frank Forsyth, one of the best architects in the world.
Yeah.
He built that. So the architecture wise in Columbia is amazing.
And I never knew that before I was, coming here for history reasons.
Right.
Because it's easy to drive right past on 30
Oh, yeah.
and never get off.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what the depiction is.
Right.
When people get off of 30 and you turn on 3rd Street and you see these run down houses, that's most people's depiction of the town.
Right.
And that shouldn't be, because if you really travel into town and really go uptown and see all these big, beautiful mansions that sat there,
Oh, yes.
you have to understand, even during the Depression in Columbia, I don't find much about Depression in Columbia history about it because the owners lived in this town. They supported the workers because some of the best workers there was the Columbia people, you know, and that's why Armstrong and all these other companies would hire them.
So did the what was like the when did the town start to have
Pennsylvania Railroad.
the downturn?
The Pennsylvania, this was home base for Pennsylvania Railroad. So they move everything to Enola. So you got to remember all the big manufacturing companies like Columbia Wagon Company. You know, they're famous because they built Chevy and Ford truck bodies back in the 1910s, up in the 20s. All the delivery trucks in New York City came from that building. So they moved rails. They put them on the rails. The Keeley Stove Company. You actually had, you know, OK Machinery. You had all Wilson's Laundry Machinery, Columbia Laundry. You had all this big equipment type places that were shipping all over the United States. So you take the trains out and the depots, the 40 train roundhouse, you take all that away, you had nothing. Right, exactly. So all the workers started leaving the town, and that's where all the business started failing. And you could see it in the industry in town. I mean, the shops and the restaurants, and just take a falter. Because one time we had 4 movie theaters downtown.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was including the Opera House, but then the silent movies. But yeah, I mean, it was a booming little town. The shops everywhere. You didn't have to leave the town. And then you had the trolley. You didn't need to buy a car.
Right.
You know, but when the railroad moves out, that's sort of the demise. I shouldn't say demise. Yeah, it's sort of, you know, people actually had to go venture out now to get a job outside of Columbia when the workforce was huge in this town. I mean, I know the Pennsylvania Railroad hired over 800 workers here. And then it was 200 for the Reading and Columbia. So that's 1,000 out of the 10,000 people in town are working for just the railroad.
Yeah, and that's not even the industry.
It's not even the industry. We had the silk mills. We had all this stuff that was getting shipped out.
The lumber.
And lumber. So yeah, I mean, that was the sad part about Columbia, and they should have been prepared for it, you know, and they didn't. So it became that little.
And that you see that a lot of places in America.
Right.
I mean, I think it's probably the world. Right. Everybody thinks it's going to just stay the same. And it's hard. It's hard when the economy or the industry changes.
But but we should have looked at more of the urban renewal, the renovations of homes, because in Columbia, you know, 5 years ago, you can get a 3,000 square foot home, well built with brick, for less than $125,000. You know, when I purchased my house for $150,000, $200,000 and made it sticks and siding. You know? And was I stupid? Yeah, I was stupid. I should have bought one of those great homes that were built to last forever by the great hands of hard workers compared to these guys who are just coming in and just build a house in less than 2 days. You know, so realistically, you know, preservation in our town. I see a lot going on in our town for preservation.
I think there's more of a push too for heritage tourism, whether it's the river or the history.
Yeah, now that we have our trail system going on with over 100,000 bikers and hikers a year now, that's amazing. You know, that trail helps, but we have to figure out how to get them up into the town. And we're doing this plaque tour, Columbia Economic Development Corporation, our group, and the Susquehanna Valley Chamber of Commerce, which you can get a brochure. It's an app. You can go around. We'll start with 10 plaques around town, and you can visit a lot of these historic places, such as Hinkle's, one of the first Easter egg dyes in the nation. Samuel Evans, who writes a historical book about the county, but it was actually very historic, one of the first to write articles about the Underground Railroad in the newspapers, one of the first in the nation to do that. And then his daughter, who's even just as big as he is, Lillian, who's the first DAR member in the country, in the state of Pennsylvania.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so she's only 41st in the nation to sign up for DAR. So she's pretty big for DAR members. Yeah. Things like that. So this tour will take you around, but it's like you said, it's to walk around and look at the beautiful architecture, like Hugh North's home over here on 3rd and 2nd and Cherry, the big home. I mean, you know what? North was named something.
Oh, the museum.
North Museum is named after him. Yeah. So you know, beautiful. It has 7 chimneys in it.
Oh my
It's an
goodness.
absolutely gorgeous place.
That's out of control.
It's out of control. That's a lot of wood cutting, you know. You better have a good hired help for that one. But you know, I don't. But but that was the type of what their thought process was about.
Right.
Building something that's going to last forever. And it did, you know,
Yeah.
amazing.
And there's really early, because you have the Wright's Ferry House.
Yep.
Then that's what, 1730.
1736.
Yeah, 36.
And
Yeah.
you got William Wright's
Yeah.
house sits beside it at 1795,
Yeah.
and you know that has like little tricks in it, which we'll talk about on the tour.
Okay.
And that's where he took in slaves,
Mhm.
and he documented when he would claim habeas corpus on the Lancaster County Court, saying that if they go back, they're going to get harmed. So
Right.
why don't you just turn them over to me? Well, he would bring them to Columbia, take them in that house, and document them.
Oh, okay.
And we never saw his documents. We know
Right.
they're buried somewhere. So, but I
Like
mean,
a
that's
bunion.
amazing to take
Yeah.
hundreds and hundreds of slaves into your house and into
Yes.
the parlor and document them
Yeah.
and put them to work in Columbia, and they were actually citizens in Columbia.
Right.
So, and right now we're working on Toe Hill right now up on Fifth Street. That's one of the most historic black abolitionists in our country that hidden any slaves up in that area.
Yes.
So that's the type of stuff that we do research on to keep our heritage going.
Well, and that's important. And I think that you were ahead of that curve. I think more historical societies and museums have started to realize that they need to be more inclusive in
Right.
in the stories that they tell.
Right.
But I think you were doing that at least 10 years ago that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really important, because I think people, once they can buy in if they
Right.
feel like they're part of the story
Right.
too.
Right. And
Yeah.
I tell that to a lot of, we get together now. A lot of, we just finally all met last year, all the societies in the county, which I thought was fantastic.
Right.
Wes Guy out of Manheim Historical Society got us all together. I thought it was fantastic. And you may not have the most history like me, or you know,
Right,
but
yeah.
it's not about that. You know, it's about finding that little niche that because people are going to visit you.
Right.
Like I told Wes about Stephen Swales lives here in Columbia, 8 years old. He's mulatto.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. The race riots started here in Columbia, 1832, and his family feels in danger, so they moved to Manheim. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So he lives there, grows up, and he goes on to list with the 54th Massachusetts, where he climbs the whole rank of lieutenant. But here, the United States government thought he was white. He was mulatto.
Yes.
He's the highest ranking official ever in the Civil War, being African American.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That is.
So I told Wes, take that story and run with it,
Oh,
man.
yeah.
Because I mean, I love the story of Stephen Swales.
Right.
Eventually, he moves to South Carolina, becomes the mayor, and becomes the senator, and becomes a good general of the. I mean, that's huge history
That
for somebody
is.
to learn about.
Yeah.
Find his home, mark it, say Stephen Swales lived right here,
Yeah.
and people will come up and visit.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah, they will.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I definitely agree. And I think it's good to everybody to get together and talk about those things,
Sure.
because you might know things that they don't, and then,
Right.
Vice versa.
Right, and I wanted to do a Christmas tour.
Oh, yeah.
At every building, because we got the trains here at the museum and stuff.
Yeah.
And every week during the Christmas season, we'll get a bus, we'll rent buses out, charge people to get on the bus, and we'll go so many historical societies that are decorated for Christmas, and then have a tour every week that you go to different societies and look at their different displays.
That's fun.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't get the traction going on these people. So maybe one year they'll do it,
Yes,
but
that would be fun.
It's funny when people say, when they meet me, they think I'm going to be like 80 years old meeting them. They say, you're not as old as I thought you were going to be. I'm like, yeah, well, I started young,
Well, I usually tell people I'm not as young as I look, so.
Well, I'm not either, That's why I wear a baseball cap to hide the balding, But it's like, it's all about passion. You have to have the passion. If you don't have passion in history, don't get involved.
Right.
If you're in other goals, stuff like that, don't do it.
No. Yeah, I agree.
But digging into research, digging into is all about preservation. It is all about preservation.
It is. And it's keeping those stories alive. And I've talked about it a lot on the podcast, but I read a really interesting book that I hadn't thought about it this way before this year, but it's Slavery in the North is the name of the book, but he wasn't a historian. He's actually a psychologist. And he was talking about, why did we lose the history of slavery in the North, and it's because we
Right.
didn't document the places attached to it. It's not that
Right.
places aren't there.
Right.
We just didn't continue to document it.
Right.
People move away, people die,
Right.
and nobody
Right.
remembered.
Right. Yeah, there's I would say there's a chance that will remember.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
No.
it's like, most people don't know that the blacks in Columbia, they had a curfew. They're in Manheim Township. They had a curfew at 5 o'clock. They must be out of Manheim Township.
Yeah.
And here in Columbia because
Yeah.
they had curfews
Yeah,
all
like
around
a
this county.
sundown
Yeah,
town.
yeah, sundown town, right. And that was it had to be hard for them,
Oh,
to,
yeah.
to live like that. But they were honorable people, very honorable people,
Yeah. Well, and you had, some very prosperous
Oh yeah,
African Americans here
Yeah.
too that were making opportunities for other people, which
Right.
I think is, I'm sure they felt an obligation to.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Smith and Whipper are my two favorite brother-in-laws. They're
Yeah.
just their story is just amazing. I'll be taking out an Underground Railroad tour this coming Saturday at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
Mostly it's for Columbia people to understand their history and
Yeah.
stuff, but I do have some people coming out. But I talk about Smith and Whipper, what they did in the nation, African American.
Oh yeah.
Amazing. We're two richest, wealthiest black men in the country, and they're sitting right down here with a lumber mill along the river. You know what they were doing on the
Right,
side.
right.
But at least they were making an effort to get these people into good places and put them to work. I mean, Columbia went down to 1820 and bought 2 plantations in Virginia and brought all the slaves up here,
Oh, really?
157,
Yeah.
and put them to work on the lumber mills. And they were making money. They were
Yeah.
not slaves. They were
Right.
making money.
Yeah.
And that's why the race riots start, because the whites got jealous.
Oh yeah.
Because
That's
here's
usually
the
what
work.
happens.
That's what usually happens. Well, we see riots today. It's not like it was back then,
Right.
And there was the whites, and they ran those free slaves up into those woods and chickies. They sat there for months without food and water. And I guarantee the good whites from Columbia were taking food to the churches, were taking food and water up to them. I don't think it was that bad for them, but to live up there for a long period until the race riots would
So
stop.
everything kind of
Yeah. So
yeah, that would be very, very
it had to be hard, but
Yeah.
you know what? They didn't give up. They knew where their place was in America. They wanted to be free, and they went right back to work. They raised families.
Yeah. And I think that was the only option that they really had.
Right.
Really.
They didn't have too much left. Right. Right.
But I there's like, who do you think you are or something, and I think it was John Legend, and one of his great grandparents was freed, but his children were, or his children weren't. I can't remember exactly how it was, but he took them all to Ohio, and then they came back and took his children from him. He freed his children. So I think his children were given to him and he freed them.
Right.
And that keeping them as owning them would have protected them.
Right.
And I'm thinking, nobody explained the law to them to say, you can say that they are enslaved, but you don't have to treat them that way.
Yeah. I mean, you could have put a document in front of all those 9 children, they would not have been able to read it.
Right.
So they just sign here, you know what you're signing into, and that's
but that was that fugitive slave time, and there was protection there.
Right. Everybody was afraid up in the state. A lot of people in Columbia were afraid when that's fugitive. But William Whipper, our Martin Luther King in the 1800s, which I always say he is. I mean, I have a speech up in Canada he did, and Frederick Douglass opens up for him.
Oh,
he
really?
opens up for him.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, that's pretty huge.
Yeah,
I mean,
that is.
So William Whipper, he was just, some of his grandstands, but he believed in temperance. When you were a slave coming into Columbia, he believed in temperance. You're not allowed to drink. You're not going to disgrace our color.
Well, yeah.
And that was pretty big, and set a big stepping stone in this town because of him. So.
He was trying to make sure that
Yeah.
it was going to work for everybody. You weren't going to make problems for him.
Yeah, exactly. And most of the slaves that came up from Virginia and Maryland, I mean, they were illiterate.
Right.
So when I did this lecture on the bridges, all the slaves would come up the river.
Yeah.
And I asked them, last question when I did history, I said, what was the color of the bridge? And they were like, red. All these pictures are red. I said, no, it was white. It was whitewashed.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I believe Whipper, Smith and Whipper's lumber mill sat right there. I believe they whitewashed that on purpose for a symbol.
So it was different.
So yeah, a literate African American enslaved,
Mhm.
if they say just white bridge,
Yeah.
it was easy for them to see this big white 1.5 mile long construction bridge, you know, and see Whipper and Smith down there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was
And
pretty cool.
I'm sure you saw it, the last year we went and saw the Harriet movie,
Oh, okay.
and it was amazing. Like, stop here, like, and it was just like verbal, because
Right.
they weren't, they were illiterate.
Right. Oh,
And
yeah.
and so that is, it makes sense that you would have clues or symbols to
I've heard
get people.
I heard
Yeah.
follow the North Star. Well, I said, what if it's cloudy after 2 weeks? What are they gonna sit there and wait?
Yeah.
Wait till the star to come, or peat moss on a tree. I'm like, that they had no sense of direction.
No,
So they had to give symbols, to figure out where they were going. And a big, large body of water to come up through, and knowing this is your last step, to freedom. That's got to be huge.
Yeah.
So.
So very good. Well, is there anything that you would like to promote to our listeners?
Oh, wow. Do we have another 2 hours? I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding. I just, people can come out,
Okay.
feel free to come out to Albatwitch Day. It's Saturday, October 17th. We have live music from Dillweed, Analog Watts, and then we have lectures by Rick Fisher, Eric Altman, who's a Bigfoot expert, one of the biggest in the country, and Mark Nesbitt from Gettysburg Ghosts. And then you can hop on the trolley with me, and we have food, we have vendors, Bigfoot vendors, we have other vendors. I have a tarot card reader, but it's a fun day just to get out, since COVID has taken over our lives.
Right.
It's time to
Something
get
to do
out.
outside.
Yeah, I
that's,
mean, we are going by CDC guidelines, but everybody's going to be spaced. We have Aunt Annie's, Bricker Fries, Rose's Deli. We have some good food coming. Donut guys from Marietta. But I just want people to come out and enjoy themselves, because it's time to get out and enjoy yourself and get out. Hopefully, it's going to be a big, beautiful sunny day.
Yeah.
I've never had any rain on any of my events, believe it or not.
Okay.
I've never had, believe it or not. I know. I like to keep the streak going for the last 9 years I've been doing this, but I like to that, and then Freight Night at the Museum on October 31st.
Okay.
But I just want people to come and visit. We have a train displays. It's called the Egg King Memorial Open House, Train Open House. We'll be doing the first weekend after Thanksgiving, and we have our 1,800 square foot train display on the second floor, which is amazing, amazing artwork. One of the best in the country. We have people all over the world has come to visit that display. And then I bring an O gauge on the lower level. So we have 2 big train displays, free. We just ask for donations. So we get very big crowds every Saturday and Sunday from 1 to 4. But like I said, it's all about keeping history alive. To me, it's just I know everybody always thought I was going to burn out after like 5 years of all the pressures I've been in. But you know what? It just keeps on getting better and better.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, all the research just becomes better and bigger. Yeah. One day I'm going to close this chapter, but I'm saying I don't think I can do any more research, and that's going to be my vacation day.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
I think that will be it for a while.
Yeah, I know it will be. I'll probably be about 95 saying that, But yeah, I mean, like I said, if you're listening from a different area, get involved. I always say everybody should volunteer at least a couple hours a month to a nonprofit, just to give them to make you feel great about it. My work's tireless. I do this voluntarily, and I've known I put 60, 70 hours in a week sometimes. But it's well worth it. Just to see people smile on their face and learn history. That's all I need. It's all about that. So, and of course, keeping the doors open.
Right. Well, how can someone contact you?
They can call, my email is ColumbiaHistory717@gmail.com. Or you can call me, text me at 717-572-7149. For any tickets or anything you want me to do, or lectures I can do at different locations. I do many different style lectures from the
Have you done
bridge,
any?
tunnels.
I was just thinking about your lectures. Have you done any like Zoom, like virtual? Or?
No, never did one yet. No, I never did one of those yet. But it's always an open option for me.
Yeah, definitely.
But I've done 40, 50 lectures in the last several years. But
Okay.
it was funny when I did Penn State, New York last year, and it was about Underground Railroad in Columbia.
Mhm.
And it was a full, he said, that's the first sellout we had all year. And I'm like, God, I'm from the other side of the river. I didn't think you want to listen to me. And then I was done this, one woman, they raised her hand. She says, can you come back and tell us more stories about Columbia?
Oh, that's good.
That's my heart.
Yeah.
So.
So that, and you're doing what you want to do.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun
Very
doing it.
good. Well, thank you very much.
Well, thank
I
you.
enjoyed it.
I hope your audience enjoyed, but it's come out and enjoy. It's
I think it's a gem. The Columbia is a gem.
it is a gem. I mean, but we have to get ourselves. Columbia has to be united
Mhm.
within itself to get things going. So, but we have good things going on. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Preservation Podcast. The resources discussed during this episode are on our website at practicalpreservationservices.com/podcast. If you received value from this episode and know someone else that will get value from it as well, please share it with them. Join us next week for another episode of the Practical Preservation Podcast. For more information on restoring your historic home, visit practicalpreservationservices.com.